I pulled up the driveway, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The plan had been simple. Arrive home in the middle of the day to surprise Jessica with a lunch I'd picked up from her favorite cafe. I imagined her surprised smile, the joy in her eyes as I walked through the door with a bouquet of fresh flowers and a box of pastries. I'd been looking forward to this moment, believing it would bring us closer together, perhaps even mend some of the frayed edges of our relationship. The sun was bright, casting a warm, welcoming glow over our modest house. I climbed the steps, the keys jangling in my hand, and unlocked the door with a sense of eager anticipation. The smell of fresh coffee greeted me, mingling with the faint scent of lilies from the bouquet I'd chosen for her. I was halfway through the hallway when I heard voices, laughter, low and intimate. At first, I thought it might be a phone call or a television program. But as I followed the sounds towards the living room, the unmistakable tones of Jessica's laughter grew clearer. My pace slowed as a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, but I shook it off, convinced it was nothing more than an innocent conversation. I reached the doorway and stopped dead in my tracks. There they were, Jessica, my wife of 7 years, entwined in a passionate embrace with another man. Their bodies were pressed together on the sofa, a tangle of limbs and unrestrained affection. Jessica's eyes were closed, her head tipped back in a way that left no room for doubt about the intensity of the moment. The world seemed to spin around me. I blinked several times, hoping the scene before me was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But no, the reality was as harsh as the sun that streamed in through the windows. For a moment, I was paralyzed. The laughter, once so familiar and comforting, now felt like a cruel taunt. Jessica's head turned slightly, and her eyes met mine. Her face paled as she recognized me, and I saw the instant flicker of guilt and fear. I stood there, the bouquet and pastries hanging limply at my sides, feeling an overwhelming mix of shock and betrayal. I should have said something, done something, demanded an explanation, perhaps. But instead, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I didn't expect to see you, so busy." She scrambled to her feet, her face flushed with a mixture of shame and desperation. The man, tall, with an unkempt beard and a look of confusion, fumbled to gather his clothes, stumbling out of the room as if trying to escape the gravity of the situation. Jessica rushed towards me, her eyes pleading. "Robert, I didn't know you'd be home early." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "It's all right, Jessica. I'm sure you had your reasons." I didn't trust myself to say more. The hurt and anger churned inside me, but I forced a tight smile and turned away. I walked back to the door, trying to calm the storm within me. My thoughts raced, plotting out a strategy, a plan. The surprise I had in mind for Jessica was about to take on a very different form. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Jessica's sobs echoing in the distance. The knot in my stomach tightened, but I knew I had to stay composed. There would be time for confrontations and explanations later. For now, I had a surprise of my own to prepare, a surprise that would make her wish she had never betrayed me. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, sealing away the chaos and heartbreak within. I stood on the porch for a moment, the warm breeze brushing against my face, trying to steady my racing heart. The sun continued its indifferent march across the sky, casting its light on everything as if nothing had changed. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to appear calm and collected. I could hear Jessica's muffled sobs through the thin walls of our house. Part of me wanted to turn around, confront her, and demand answers. But that wouldn't be wise. Not yet. Not when emotions were so raw and my plans so unformed. I walked down the driveway, the weight of my decisions settling heavily on my shoulders. The air was filled with the sounds of everyday life, children playing, cars driving by, a lawnmower in the distance. Everything seemed so normal, so utterly ordinary, in stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. Once I was safely in my car, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, trying to reconcile the calm facade I was projecting with the turmoil within. I had to keep it together and maintain the appearance of forgiveness. It was the only way to execute the plan I had begun to formulate. I drove aimlessly through the city, the streets blurring by as I lost myself in thought. I considered how best to play this game, how to make Jessica believe that I had truly forgiven her, that I was willing to put the past behind us. She needed to remain unaware of my true intentions. I needed her to feel secure, to believe that things would return to normal so that when the time came, my actions would hit her with the full force of their betrayal. I found a quiet park and parked my car under a large oak tree. Seeking solace in the solitude, I turned off the engine and sat in the stillness, gathering my thoughts. The plan was beginning to take shape, a blueprint for the retribution I had in mind. I envisioned the steps I needed to take, how to manipulate Jessica into signing documents, and how to create a scenario where she would be left with nothing. The more I thought about it, the clearer the path became. As I sat there, I could almost hear the echo of her apologies, and see the desperate look in her eyes. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. The goal was to make her believe that everything was all right, that our life together could continue as if nothing had happened. Little did she know, I was preparing to dismantle everything she held dear. With a final, steadying breath, I started the car and drove back home. I had to be careful now, to ensure that my actions wouldn't reveal the storm brewing beneath the surface. I had to appear as though I was ready to move forward. Ready to forgive. When I walked through the door again, Jessica looked up from the living room, her eyes red and swollen. She tried to offer a hesitant smile, but I could see the fear lurking behind it. I forced a reassuring smile in return. "I've been thinking," I said gently, "and I realize that we both made mistakes. But I want to move forward. I want us to work through this." Jessica's relief was palpable, and she hurried to embrace me, her arms clinging tightly around my neck. I patted her back awkwardly, suppressing the urge to pull away. "Thank you, Robert," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promise I'll make things right." I nodded, though my mind was already working on the next steps of my plan. I needed to keep up this pretense for now, to build trust and lull her into a false sense of security. Only then would I be able to execute my plan with the precision and coldness it required. As I looked at Jessica, the weight of what lay ahead settled over me. I would have to be meticulous and calculating, but for now, I was the epitome of forgiveness and understanding, a facade designed to mask the retribution that was about to unfold. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Jessica had retreated to the bedroom, presumably to gather herself after our earlier conversation. I watched her go, my expression carefully neutral, but inside, I was already turning over the details of my plan. I knew that the key to my revenge lay in exploiting Jessica's weaknesses, her financial instability, her trust in me, and the false sense of security I had carefully crafted. My mind raced with strategies as I made my way to the study, the one room in the house that held the answers I needed. The study was a sanctuary of sorts, a room where we had always kept our important documents and financial records. I pulled open the drawer of my desk and began sifting through the various folders and papers. There were tax returns, bank statements, and mortgage documents, each one a piece of the puzzle I needed to unravel. I started with the bank statements. The large, leather-bound ledger of our joint accounts lay before me, the numbers and figures blurring together. I meticulously reviewed each entry, noting discrepancies and potential areas of manipulation. Our savings had dwindled over the past few years, largely due to some poor investments and unforeseen expenses. It was clear that Jessica had been struggling to keep up, and her financial woes were about to become the linchpin of my plan. Next, I moved to the mortgage documents. The house was our greatest asset, but also our greatest liability. The payments had been stretching us thin, and I knew that if I could find a way to use this to my advantage, it would be a significant blow to Jessica. I rifled through the papers, searching for any clauses or stipulations that could be leveraged. Among the documents, I found a copy of a loan agreement that had been taken out a year ago. The terms were onerous, and I had a hunch that Jessica might have overlooked some of the fine print. It was a perfect opportunity for me to exploit, if I could find a way to manipulate the agreement or present it in a way that would leave her with little choice but to accept unfavorable terms. I could tighten my grip on the situation. As I worked, I could almost hear the ticking of a clock, each second bringing me closer to the moment when everything would come crashing down. I pulled out Jessica's financial records, her credit card statements, and any other documents I could find. She had been using her credit cards excessively, trying to keep up appearances and manage her debts, and this was another avenue for me to explore. I noticed a series of late payments and increasing credit card debt. Some missed bills and collections notices had been accumulating over time. I made detailed notes, plotting how I could use this information to further undermine her position. It was clear that her financial situation was precarious, and I could use this to my advantage in several ways. Hours passed as I pored over the documents, my mind working furiously to piece together a strategy. The more I uncovered, the more certain I became that I could execute my plan flawlessly. I would need to carefully orchestrate the presentation of this information, ensuring that Jessica would be left with no choice but to agree to terms that would leave her destitute. I meticulously organized the documents, separating them into categories based on their potential impact. I knew that timing would be crucial. If I revealed this information too soon, it might alert Jessica to my true intentions. But if I waited too long, I might lose the element of surprise. As I sat back and surveyed my work, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, Jessica would face the consequences of her actions. My plan was taking shape, and every document, every detail, was a step closer to the retribution I had in mind. I closed the drawer and left the study, the weight of the knowledge and the power it gave me pressing heavily on my shoulders. The next phase of my plan would require careful execution, but for now, I had laid the groundwork for the ultimate revenge. The blueprint was complete, and the path to Jessica's downfall was clear. The next few days were a delicate dance of appearances. Jessica seemed to sense that something had changed, but she couldn't quite place what it was. I maintained a facade of calm and understanding, all the while carefully orchestrating my plan. I needed her to believe that reconciliation was not only possible but necessary, and that the only way forward was through complete forgiveness. I approached this with calculated subtlety. Mornings began with warm gestures, small, seemingly spontaneous acts of kindness. I made her coffee just the way she liked it, brought home her favorite pastries, and left little notes of encouragement. The kind of things that would remind her of the affection we once shared, making it easier for her to let her guard down. During dinners, I made a point of engaging in heartfelt conversations. I talked about the future, our plans, and how important it was for us to move past the mistakes of the past. I spoke in soft, reassuring tones, emphasizing that our relationship was worth saving and that our love was strong enough to overcome any obstacles. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I took her hand gently in mine. Her eyes met mine with a mixture of relief and vulnerability. I had carefully timed this moment, ensuring that her emotions were raw and that the atmosphere was conducive to my manipulative goals. "Jessica," I said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about us. About what happened. I know I was hurt, and I know you were too. But I believe that if we truly want to make this work, we need to let go of the past and focus on our future." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry, Robert. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make it right. I want us to be okay." I nodded, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "I believe you, Jessica. I do. But to move forward, we have to be completely honest with each other and let go of any resentment. We need to start fresh. With a clean slate." I watched as she processed my words, the mixture of hope and desperation clear on her face. This was precisely the reaction I had anticipated. Her need for redemption and her desire to fix things made her vulnerable to my manipulation. She wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, and I was more than willing to feed into that desire. Over the next few weeks, I continued to reinforce this narrative. I planned activities that would make Jessica feel cherished and valued. We had romantic dinners, took long walks in the park, and spent evenings reminiscing about the good times we had shared. All of these gestures were designed to create a sense of normalcy and security, to lull her into a state where she believed our relationship could truly be salvaged. I also began to subtly introduce the idea of making changes to our financial situation, framing it as a joint decision that would benefit us both. I suggested consulting with a financial advisor to help us manage our debts and ensure a stable future. Jessica, eager to prove her commitment and rectify her mistakes, agreed without hesitation. These conversations were carefully crafted to appear as if they were coming from a place of concern and love. In reality, they were strategic moves designed to set the stage for the next phase of my plan. By getting her involved in these discussions and decisions, I ensured that she would be more susceptible to the subsequent manipulations. I knew that the moment would come when I would need to reveal the true extent of her vulnerability. But for now, I focused on maintaining the illusion of reconciliation. I wanted Jessica to feel that the only path forward was through our mutual forgiveness and the rebuilding of trust. By creating this environment of emotional security, I set the perfect stage for my final move. She believed in the possibility of redemption, and I used that belief to ensure that when the time came, she would be completely unprepared for the full scope of my retribution. As I watched her sleep peacefully beside me, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. The emotional game was progressing perfectly. She was beginning to see me as her savior, the one who could fix everything. Little did she know, the real game was just beginning. The days rolled by in a predictable rhythm. The emotional facade I had carefully crafted was working perfectly. Jessica seemed genuinely hopeful about our future, and our relationship appeared to be on the mend. She was more open and more attentive, exactly the way I needed her to be. One evening, as we settled into our routine, I brought up the topic of financial stability again. I framed it as a necessary step towards securing our future, a way to ensure that we could build a life together without the stress of mounting debt and financial uncertainty. I think it's time we addressed our financial situation more seriously, I suggested one night as we sat together at the dining table. We've talked about consulting with a financial advisor, but I believe we should also make some formal changes to our accounts. We must get everything sorted out properly. Jessica nodded in agreement, her face reflecting her eagerness to resolve our issues. I completely agree. What do you have in mind? I had anticipated this response and was prepared. I had already spoken with a lawyer and arranged for a set of documents that would ostensibly be for the restructuring of our finances and the formalization of our property agreements. I explained it to Jessica as a routine step to streamline our financial management. Here's what I've done, I said, presenting her with a stack of neatly organized papers. I've had these documents prepared to consolidate our assets and adjust our mortgage terms. It's a standard procedure, but it's essential for ensuring everything is in order. The lawyer said it would be best if we sign these now to avoid any future complications. Jessica looked at the documents, her brow furrowing slightly as she flipped through the pages. These look like a lot of paperwork. Are you sure everything is in order? Absolutely, I reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I've reviewed everything thoroughly. The lawyer said it's a straightforward process, and we must take care of this now. We need to be proactive about our future. Jessica hesitated for a moment, but my reassuring tone and the effort I had put into creating a sense of urgency swayed her. She trusted me, and I could see that trust reflected in her eyes. She took a pen and began to sign the documents, her movements deliberate but weary. I watched her with an inner satisfaction, my mind ticking off the steps of my plan. Each signature she added was a step closer to her complete downfall. The documents she was signing were designed to appear as routine financial agreements, but in reality, they contained clauses that would transfer most of our assets to me, while leaving her with the burden of debts and unfavorable terms. The legal jargon was dense and convoluted, crafted to confuse and overwhelm. I had made sure that the documents were just unclear enough to discourage scrutiny but straightforward enough to appear legitimate. The last thing I wanted was for Jessica to second-guess or investigate further. As she signed the final document, I could see a flicker of unease in her eyes, but she dismissed it with a forced smile. All right, it's done. I hope this helps us move forward. I nodded, my face carefully neutral. It will, Jessica. It's a big step towards resolving our financial issues. We spent the rest of the evening in a subdued but hopeful mood, discussing our plans and dreaming of a better future. I played the part of the supportive partner, ensuring that any trace of doubt was buried beneath layers of encouragement and optimism. When Jessica finally went to bed, I stayed up, reviewing the signed documents one last time. The final pieces of my plan were now in place. The financial burden I had carefully orchestrated would soon become evident, and Jessica would be faced with the full extent of her vulnerability. As I looked over the papers, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. The trap was set, and she had walked right into it. The next phase of my plan would be to let the reality of her new financial situation sink in and watch as the consequences of her actions unfold. For now, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for the final act in this meticulously crafted drama. Everything was going according to plan, and soon, Jessica would understand the full scope of the betrayal she had unwittingly helped to orchestrate. The days following the signing of the documents were filled with a calculated calmness. Jessica seemed more relaxed. believing that our financial issues were being handled and that our future was on the mend. I had achieved the perfect illusion of reconciliation, and now it was time to set the stage for the next act. I began the legal process with meticulous attention to detail. My lawyer, an old friend who was well versed in high-stakes divorce cases, was already briefed on the situation. We filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, a standard choice that would seem almost too ordinary for the gravity of the situation. I made sure to craft the initial filings in a way that would cast Jessica in a negative light. I included vague but damaging claims about her financial mismanagement and lack of responsibility, without providing specific details that could be easily disproved. This would create a narrative that painted her as a careless spender, someone who had recklessly squandered our assets and driven us into financial ruin. The media coverage was minimal, but I subtly leaked information to a few trusted contacts to ensure that the story would spread among our social circles. The whispers and rumors served as a form of psychological pressure on Jessica, making her the subject of judgment and speculation. I knew that public perception could be a powerful tool, and I used it to further isolate her and diminish her standing. While the legal procedures were unfolding, I turned my attention to worsening Jessica's financial situation. I utilized my connections with bank officials and credit agencies, subtly influencing their actions to create additional complications for her. I orchestrated a series of moves designed to appear as if they were routine, but which would have a devastating impact on her finances. One of the first actions I took was to have her credit cards frozen. I made a few phone calls to my contacts in the banking industry, using my influence to ensure that her cards would be blocked due to suspicious activity. This would cause immediate distress and inconvenience, preventing her from accessing funds she might need to manage her day-to-day expenses. Next, I turned my attention to her bank accounts. I arranged for a temporary freeze on her primary checking and savings accounts, citing administrative errors and routine account reviews as the reasons. This move was designed to create a sense of urgency and panic, forcing her to rely on me even more as she navigated these unexpected obstacles. The final touch was to have her credit report updated with false entries, delayed payments and minor defaults that would further tarnish her financial reputation. I ensured that these changes would be difficult to trace back to me, creating a smokescreen of plausible deniability. The results were almost immediate. Jessica began to receive notifications of her blocked credit cards and frozen bank accounts. Her initial confusion quickly turned to frustration, and then to panic. She came to me for reassurance, her eyes wide with worry. "Robert, what's happening?" she asked one evening, clutching a stack of documents and letters. "I can't access my accounts. My credit cards aren't working. This doesn't make any sense." I feigned concern, my voice laced with genuine-sounding empathy. "I don't understand either, Jessica. This is so frustrating. I'll help you sort it out. We'll get this fixed." I spent the next few hours on the phone with various financial institutions, all while keeping up the pretense of being an engaged and supportive partner. I made it seem as though I was fighting on her behalf, trying to resolve the issues she was facing. In reality, I was carefully monitoring the situation, ensuring that my manipulations continued to have their desired effect. Jessica's mounting financial troubles only added to the stress of the divorce process. The legal filings and public gossip had already put her on edge, and now the added financial strain made her feel increasingly vulnerable and isolated. The combined pressure was beginning to take its toll on her, making it harder for her to focus on defending herself in the divorce proceedings. As I watched her struggle, a cold satisfaction settled over me. The groundwork had been laid, and my plan was coming to fruition. The final act of this elaborate drama was drawing near, and Jessica was increasingly cornered by the traps I had so carefully set. As Jessica's financial troubles deepened, I knew it was time to turn up the heat on another front, her social standing. The damage to her reputation would further isolate her and make her more vulnerable, which was exactly what I needed to ensure the success of my plan. I began by carefully orchestrating a campaign of whispers and rumors, using my social connections to spread damaging information about Jessica. I reached out to friends, acquaintances, and even a few influential figures in our social circle, seeding the notion that Jessica's behavior had been questionable. At first, I casually mentioned Jessica's financial mismanagement in conversations, framing it as a consequence of her irresponsible spending habits. I highlighted the stress she was under. suggesting that her actions were driven by financial desperation. This created a backdrop of instability that would make her seem unreliable and irresponsible. The next step was to introduce more personal and scandalous elements into the mix. I started mentioning Jessica's new relationship with her lover, carefully weaving the details into conversations in a way that implied infidelity and a lack of moral integrity. I made sure to emphasize the timing, suggesting that her actions had been particularly egregious given our ongoing struggles and the appearance of our seemingly happy marriage. I chose my words carefully, making sure to present the information in a way that seemed casual and offhand, as if I was simply recounting things I had heard. I was meticulous in ensuring that the details varied slightly with each telling, making the rumors seem more credible and less traceable back to me. I also leaked information about the personal nature of Jessica's affair. I implied that it had been going on for a while and that her actions had been an open secret among those who knew her well. The goal was to make it seem like Jessica's behavior was both egregious and widely known, further eroding her respectability. As the rumors spread, Jessica began to notice a change in the way people interacted with her. Friends who had once been supportive now seemed distant, and acquaintances who had previously been friendly avoided her. She could sense the shift in the atmosphere, but she was too overwhelmed by her financial problems to fully grasp the cause. One evening, Jessica came to me visibly upset. She had received a series of cold, judgmental messages and comments from former friends and colleagues. Her face was drawn with worry, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Robert, I don't understand what's happening," she said, her eyes pleading for an explanation. "People are treating me differently. I'm hearing things, horrible things about myself. It's like everyone has turned against me." I looked at her with a mixture of feigned concern and hidden satisfaction. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Jessica, I don't know what people are saying, but we need to focus on resolving our issues. Maybe this is just a phase, and things will get better." I maintained a supportive demeanor, offering words of encouragement while secretly reveling in her growing despair. My manipulation had successfully sowed distrust and diminished her standing within our social circles. The whispers of scandal and financial irresponsibility were taking their toll, pushing Jessica further into isolation. The culmination of my efforts was nearing. As Jessica struggled to cope with the mounting pressure from all sides, her ability to fight back was weakening. The combination of financial strain, social ostracism, and the legal proceedings had left her vulnerable and desperate. The final chapter of this drama was approaching, and as I watched Jessica's world unravel, I knew that my plan had been executed with precision. The destruction of her reputation was complete, and soon she would face the full force of the consequences I had orchestrated. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, carrying with it the culmination of months of meticulous planning and manipulation. The courtroom was filled with the tension of unresolved conflicts, but for me, it was the stage for the final act of my orchestrated drama. Jessica arrived at the courthouse looking weary and defeated. The strain of the financial crisis, coupled with the social fallout and the emotional turmoil, had taken a significant toll on her. Her once confident demeanor was now replaced by a pallor of exhaustion and despair. I was the picture of composed confidence as I walked into the courtroom. I had arranged for my lawyer to present our case with precision, ensuring that every detail aligned with the narrative I had so carefully crafted. We had a solid case, bolstered by the financial documents and the negative image I had cultivated through the rumors and social manipulation. As the proceedings began, my lawyer presented a carefully prepared argument. We highlighted Jessica's financial irresponsibility, her failure to manage our assets properly, and her indiscretions. The narrative was designed to paint her in the worst possible light while portraying me as the wronged party seeking a fair resolution. The judge listened attentively as the case was laid out, and I could see the impact of our strategy. The evidence of Jessica's financial mismanagement, combined with the damaging rumors I had spread, created a powerful case against her. The portrayal of her as a careless spender and a morally questionable individual resonated in the courtroom. And it was clear that the tide was turning in my favor. Jessica's lawyer attempted to counter the claims, but the damage was done. The financial records, the social gossip, and the carefully timed legal maneuvers had set the stage for a decisive victory. The judge's demeanor shifted as the evidence mounted, and it became evident that the case was tilting in my favor. The final ruling was a crushing blow to Jessica. The judge granted me the lion's share of the marital assets, including the house, the savings, and the investments. The division of property was heavily skewed in my favor, reflecting the narrative that I had so meticulously crafted. Jessica was left with a significantly reduced portion, barely enough to cover her immediate needs. As the court proceedings concluded, I could see the devastation in Jessica's eyes. The weight of the judgment was almost palpable, and the realization of her loss was sinking in. The house, the one place that had once been our shared sanctuary, was now mine. A symbol of the complete dismantling of her world. Jessica attempted to maintain her composure as she gathered her things and left the courtroom, but the facade was thin. Her shoulders were slumped, and her eyes were red with unshed tears. The finality of the judgment had stripped her of not only her financial security but also her dignity and social standing. I watched her leave, a cold satisfaction settling over me. The plan had been executed flawlessly, and the outcome was precisely what I had envisioned. The final blow had been delivered, and Jessica was left to grapple with the full extent of her losses. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of grim accomplishment. I had achieved everything I set out to do, obtaining the house, the money, and even the social assets we had once shared. The elaborate scheme of revenge had reached its conclusion, and the once formidable Jessica was now left to face the consequences of her actions. The aftermath was a period of reflection and adjustment. I moved into the house, now fully mine, and began to enjoy the fruits of my strategic planning. The legal and social victories were complete, and I could finally let go of the pretense, knowing that my meticulous revenge had been successful. The days following the divorce were marked by an eerie silence. The house, once a shared space filled with echoes of our past, now belonged solely to me. Jessica had moved out, but the remnants of her presence lingered, her things packed away in boxes. Her scent still faintly in the air. I observed her from a distance, using my network to stay informed about her situation. It was a voyeuristic pleasure to witness the complete unraveling of her life. Jessica's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving, and the consequences of her actions were becoming all too clear. The psychological pressure on Jessica was evident. She had lost her home, her financial security, and her social standing. The combination of these losses created a perfect storm of despair. Her once proud demeanor was now replaced by a shadow of the person she had been. The social circles that had once admired her now avoided her, leaving her isolated and alone. I learned from mutual acquaintances that Jessica was struggling to find a stable place to live. The apartment she had rented was modest at best, a far cry from the luxurious home we had once shared. Her financial resources were depleted, and she was forced to live frugally, stretching every dollar just to make ends meet. The psychological impact was evident in her appearance. She looked worn down, her eyes lacking the spark they once had. There were frequent mentions of sleepless nights and anxiety, her once gregarious personality now overshadowed by a pervasive sense of defeat. Jessica had attempted to reach out to old friends, seeking support and a semblance of normalcy, but her pleas were often met with cold silence. The rumors that had been spread about her had taken root, and she found herself ostracized from the very circles that had once been her social sanctuary. It was fascinating to watch how the weight of her losses affected her. The pressure of managing day-to-day life on a tight budget, combined with the psychological strain of public shame and personal failure, was taking a heavy toll. She was increasingly withdrawn, her attempts to maintain a facade of composure becoming more strained with each passing day. I couldn't help but feel a cold satisfaction as I observed the aftermath of my actions. The elaborate web I had spun had ensnared her completely, leaving her in a state of constant struggle. The psychological pressure was palpable, and her suffering was a testament to the success of my meticulously planned retribution. Every aspect of her former life had been systematically dismantled, her financial stability, her social connections, and even her sense of self-worth. Each failure, each setback was a reflection of the consequences of her actions and the ruthlessness of my revenge. As I continued to watch from afar, I knew that Jessica's path forward would be a difficult one. The life she had once known was gone, replaced by a harsh reality of financial instability and social alienation. The psychological scars of her fall from grace would linger long after the physical losses had been addressed. The finality of her situation was a reminder of the effectiveness of my plan. The psychological pressure and the consequences of her actions were an ongoing reminder of the price she had paid. It was a fitting end to the elaborate scheme of revenge that had consumed so much of my energy and thought. In the end, as Jessica grappled with the fallout of her choices, I could take a grim satisfaction in the completeness of her downfall. The revenge was not just about material possessions but about the total dismantling of her former life. As I looked around at the life I had reclaimed, I knew that the psychological weight of her losses was a testament to the depth of my carefully executed plan. The day I finally moved into my new home was marked by a profound sense of liberation. The spacious, modern house was a testament to my success, a sanctuary that reflected not just my financial gain but the culmination of my carefully orchestrated plan. I reveled in the sense of control and accomplishment that came with it. The new house was more than just a dwelling, it was a symbol of my victory. Every detail, from the elegant furnishings to the pristine garden, spoke to the new chapter of my life, one free from the entanglements of my past. The process of unpacking and settling in was accompanied by a deep satisfaction. The house was my reward, a tangible manifestation of my success in dismantling Jessica's life. I took pleasure in every aspect of my new life. The quiet, serene environment provided a stark contrast to the turmoil and conflict of the past months. I filled my days with activities that brought me joy and a renewed sense of purpose. Whether it was hosting gatherings with old friends who had supported me throughout or indulging in hobbies I had neglected, the freedom and luxury of my new situation were invigorating. Each day in the new home was a celebration of the freedom I had achieved. I explored the neighborhood, familiarized myself with the local amenities, and relished in the solitude and privacy that my new residence afforded. It was a life unburdened by the weight of past grievances, a fresh start that was entirely of my own making. Meanwhile, Jessica's life had taken a dramatic turn. The harsh reality of her situation was a stark contrast to the life I was now enjoying. She had been forced into a series of temporary accommodations, each less stable and secure than the last. The financial strain was relentless, and she struggled to make ends meet with the limited resources she had. Without the support of friends or family, Jessica's days were consumed by the basic struggle for survival. She found herself in a cycle of finding odd jobs, dealing with mounting bills, and facing the daily uncertainty of her financial situation. The once vibrant socialite was now a shadow of her former self, isolated and grappling with the fallout of her actions. Her attempts to reach out for help were met with indifference or outright rejection. The social ostracism that had been a part of my plan had effectively severed her connections, leaving her without a network of support. The whispers and rumors that I had seeded had taken root, and the weight of public judgment only added to her already significant burdens. Every day was a new challenge for Jessica, marked by the struggle to find stability and maintain her dignity. The contrast between her existence and mine was stark, and I was acutely aware of the disparity. While I reveled in the comfort and freedom of my new life, Jessica was entrenched in a battle for survival, her previous privileges now a distant memory. From my vantage point, the finality of her situation was a testament to the effectiveness of my plan. The sense of victory I felt was underscored by the sight of her struggle. I had succeeded not just in reclaiming what was mine but in ensuring that the consequences of her actions were as severe as I had intended. As I settled into my new home, I reflected on the path that had led me here. The process of rebuilding my life, coupled with the knowledge of Jessica's plight, provided a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in the success of my plan, but also a recognition of the profound impact it had on her.